Welcome to Spectacles. I'm Ellen Rogers.
And I'm Betsy LeBeau.
Well, bipolar is a disorder of the brain, a disorder that can be seen on scans and has a genetic link and affects more than 5.5 million adults of all ages, races, and social classes. It is believed that if you have a bipolar parent, your chance of having a serious mental illness is close to 30%. Symptoms have a far-reaching range. There is mania, an elevated mood with rapid speech, insomnia, and elation, or depression, profound sadness, fatigue, and at times thoughts of suicide. With us today is Wally Prechter of the Heinz C. Prechter Bipolar Research Fund at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and Dr. Sue O'Shea. She's the director of the Stem Cell Lab, also at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. Welcome to Spectacles, ladies.
Yes, welcome.
Thank you
for taking the time.
We have a wealth of experience and education here. I appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. You know, we're just going to get right to the heart of it, Wally. You have a personal experience with this disease and with your family, and I so appreciate you sharing that with our viewers.
Absolutely. My late husband, Heinz Prechter, he suffered from the illness for most of his life, even though he really was never diagnosed with it. He had tremendous energy, was charismatic, and loved people, and there was nothing that he could not do. And that basically was his motto in his life, and he could look at a blueprint and imagine it or make it in reality, and that's how he was. He had tremendous energy, didn't need much sleep, and he worked very, very hard. He was an entrepreneur, created lots of different things in different companies and brought the sunroof to America, and at the same time, while having all these gifts, he had the burden of this illness. We were married about 2.5 years when he fell into this very, very deep depression that totally paralyzed him, and it lasted for 1.5 years. And he had several more, and on July 6, 2001, he committed suicide. My own daughter also suffers from the illness, a lot more severe form of the same illness, I have to say, and she came down with mania, tremendous mania, 3 months after her father died. She's dealing with it in her own way. She's fighting this illness every day, and I watch her fight it. It's very difficult, but I admire her because she's standing up against it, and she's fighting the stigma, and she's working with her illness and is an advocate for it. So yes, I've had lots of experience with it.
When I think through experiences in really high-functioning people, I think you see that really high-functioning people have bipolar, and maybe that's the range of the elation. You know, you get so much done, and then you fall into the other side effects. Through your personal experience, you started the fund. Tell us about those steps.
Well, after Heinz died, my children and I decided to start a fund to do something about the illness. It was in November of 2001 to help find genetic solutions for people who have bipolar. It was a very naive concept in a way, but we created the fund, which was called the Heinz C. Prechter Fund for Manic Depression at the time. And we raised monies, lots of money, and we gave away most of it to 8 different institutions, academic institutions, who did genetic research into bipolar at the time. And that is why we created the fund at that time.
And your husband, Heinz Prechter, what did he do? What is he known for?
He brought the sunroof to America and created American Sunroof Corporation at the time.
Yeah, I know the name.
Yes.
So he was a very creative man.
He was incredibly creative. There was nothing that he could not do, and it was just an exhilaration to be next to him, because I'm very pragmatic, and he was very forward-looking and had an incredible vision about things.
Did they say Van Gogh had bipolar?
That's what they say. Yeah.
So you've changed I think that's an interesting point we didn't touch on, that it was you started as manic depression, and as through research why the name change?
The name change happened after 3.5 years having lots of relationships with different universities and so forth, and thinking about how do I make sure that this fund helps people who have this illness, because giving money away only was not going to bring me to a point that I could say we can have research that has results. And so in negotiations and talks with the University of Michigan, we decided to move the fund over in April 2004. And after that, it was called the Heinz C. Prechter Bipolar Research Fund at the University of Michigan Depression Center, where it is today. Has a tremendous vision and mission, and has changed again because now we have a genetic repository that's independently funded, the only one, the largest one in the nation. We have a longitudinal study where patients go and get all their samplings done, and they fill out their questionnaires. And we collect big data about people who have bipolar. So it has changed today and has become a different fund, a better fund with a tremendous vision.
I think what's really changed too is when Heinz passed, and I was lucky to be able to call him a friend, and I was enthused by his energy and his creativeness, and we miss him.
Thank you.
From not, I mean, how we've even changed that our viewers, when we say bipolar, they have some recognition of what that may be, and that it's become something in our world, in our society, that more knowledge. Have you found that that's gained more acceptance or more understanding?
Absolutely. You have people coming forward like Patrick Kennedy. You have Kay Redfield Jameson, herself a psychiatrist who had the illness, fighting with it. Obviously, Robin Williams. We are talking about people today that have the illness, that had the illness, and they are stepping forward, writing books and talking about it openly, and so I think it makes a big difference.
And how does it differ from manic depression? I mean,
It's
how
the
do you
same.
differ? It is the
Manic
same
depression
name.
is basically an older name for it.
Oh, I see.
Bipolar
Okay.
signifies the two different poles that people live with
Okay.
who have the illness.
Sue, we haven't forgotten about you. That's what I thought. You are being very patient.
I'm totally fine.
We're going to get into more of the stem cell research, but how has just the knowledge and more media attention to bipolar helped in your research?
I think that almost all of us know someone who has bipolar disorder. And I think that initially the National Institutes of Health didn't have a huge fund for studying neuropsychiatric disease. And I think that it's become more publicized and people are more willing to talk about it. Maybe the stigma is starting to decrease a little bit. And I think that's been a tremendous help for us.
And there are different types of bipolar, too,
There
correct?
are, yes.
Yes.
More and less severe, more manic, less manic, all kinds of different symptoms.
And so people are treated differently for their symptoms.
They are.
Okay.
Well, and that's an interesting point that Betsy's made. We just talked in the beginning about the vast range of the symptoms. How difficult does that make it then to diagnose?
Well, I agree with that. When you have a person in front of you who has mania, why would you first of all go to the doctor? But if you do go to the doctors, they might think you have ADHD, for instance,
That's
because of the
true.
way you're reacting to things and so forth. And on the flip side of that, you might think that somebody has unipolar depression versus bipolar depression, which happens a whole lot.
What's
That
unipolar?
Unipolar is unipolar depression that does not show signs of mania.
Only depressed.
Only
I
depression.
And in
see.
fact, most people, I think,
Yes.
come in with a
That's
diagnosis
correct.
of depression,
First.
and it may take decades before they have a manic episode and get the proper diagnosis and therefore the proper treatment.
That's correct.
And that's a huge problem.
That's interesting. Very
Yes.
interesting. So usually if you have depression, you have the other side.
No,
Not always.
no,
No.
in fact, not at all.
Okay.
I mean,
so
it's
there
more
is
rare.
somebody that's, okay. So sometimes.
Depression can be just depression.
Right.
Okay.
And depression can be one pole of this cyclical sort of bipolar illness.
Okay. Okay.
And what a great answers, right? Just in that, look at how much we've learned since Heinz. Tell us, you chose U of M. You created the fund, and you chose U of M. What's the benefit of the collaboration there?
It's not a collaboration anymore. The fund belongs to the university. And it's a natural because it sits now within the Depression Center, which does research into depression. Obviously, University of Michigan is known for excellence in research, education, outreach, and not just on a statewide or nationwide basis, but internationally. So it was a perfect fit for the fund to move on to that, because in the end effect, we want to help people with what we find out with our research.
And bipolar hasn't gotten more rampant or hasn't really increased. Is it just more of an awareness, or do you think it has increased?
From what I hear, and again, do not forget, I'm not a doctor.
Right, right,
I'm
you know
just-
that, right.
I have to preface that all the time. From what I understand, we have more diagnoses, but it's because we are more aware of it.
Okay, that's what I
And
was
people
thinking.
are more aware of it. They will watch their children, they watch people they know. And all of a sudden they see, wow, this is really strange. Why would somebody have these ups and downs and cyclical things going on in their lives and not being able to control it? Because trust me, these people want to control it, but they cannot.
Let's talk a little bit about medications again. Not that you're a doctor,
That's
but
okay.
your experience is that, and I think as lay people, we
Yes.
what I know is that bipolar is not controlled, but medication does
Yes.
help.
Obviously,
tell us
yes,
about
it does.
that, about your journey
Well,
with that.
What you need to be aware of is that there's always a combination of medication and psychotherapy which is the common standard, the gold standard today. And maybe things will change down the road. On the other hand, it does not help that many people. There's a low percentage where it really completely works all the time, because you have to readjust medications all the time, because the illness changes all the time.
Well, that's like our experience with ADD and HDD.
That's
is that
correct.
with children, is that their weight changes,
Yes.
their anxiety changes, their growth changes, and
That's
so
right.
it's this cocktail always
Yes.
of, in
Yes.
that medicine. Is that true also?
That's
with
absolutely
bipolar?
true. It's a trial and error type thing. And you have to really be faithful and compliant and stick with what you're on, because it can be very dangerous if you get off your medications. But always, always confirm with your physician what you're supposed to do.
And ADHD, you're not saying is connected to bipolar in any way.
I'm not saying that it
Yes,
is,
right.
but
Well, no, I
I do
know.
believe that you probably have to talk to professionals who will tell you,
That's good, yeah.
yes,
What
the
you
details
were
on that.
dealing with. And there's neurotic behavior versus psychotic behavior, and there's coping with some of it, and then there's going to, need help with drugs. And I guess that's always the fine line with you and your psychiatrist or your counselor.
That's right. I, as a layperson, I will not say what you're supposed to do, because I
Right.
do believe you honestly have to go and find
You do.
professional help.
Okay.
I know with my, I have a cousin that suffered from bipolar, and he was given the medication but didn't want to take
Yeah,
it.
that's true,
So
too. I hear
there's
about
there's
that.
also,
Happens a lot.
right? Because
Yes.
he said his life was cloudy then.
Yes, I hear that a lot. It takes down their enthusiasm, it takes down their creativity. Kay Redfield Jamison writes about that in her books, that it kind of changed her, and she will admit to that. It is something that can happen. I believe that, yes.
And other people have really bad side effects, so they want to
Yes.
stop taking the medicine because they gain weight or they feel uncomfortable,
Right.
and so it's really a difficult problem.
In your research, have there been a lot of new findings, or is it just kind of just taking it to the next level, or?
So in the previous decade, I think people looked for a genetic component to bipolar disorder. And when that wasn't really forthcoming, people started needing other kinds of cell-based models, which is really what we do. So you can imagine that if you have coronary disease, you can take a coronary vessel and look and see what's wrong. But if you've got a neuropsychiatric disorder, there's no way that you can take a sample from someone's brain.
Oh, right.
And so now that we have stem cell biology and stem cell research, for the very first time we can look at neurons from people who are diagnosed with bipolar and compare those to controls. So that's where our research is going.
And we're going to stop right there. We have to break, and it's a really great, compelling way to stay with us, because we're going to learn more about how stem cell research is really helping with this disease.
Very interesting.
Stay with us.
Hey, yo, Tim, get on your job, kid. We got school, yo. I see you in the window, man. You want me to do? I got the bus here, man. I got connections. We holding up traffic. Let's go. I'm not letting you waste your life like that, yeah.
Welcome back to Spectacles. I'm Ellen Rogers.
And I'm Betsy LeBeau.
We're talking with two wonderful ladies that have taken the time out of their busy lives to be with us. Wally Prechter of the Heinz C. Prechter Fund, and Sue O'Shea from the University of Michigan Department of Stem Cell Research. And we're talking about bipolar disorder, and what is fascinating about this disease is that you can see it, or disorder, you can see it. And so we have some great visuals that thank you for bringing with us.
It's fascinating.
Tell us what we're seeing right here, Sue.
So one of the biggest medical advances in the last 5 years has been the ability to take an adult somatic cell, like a skin cell, off your elbow and put it into a tissue culture dish and reset the biological clock so that the cell behaves not like a skin cell, but as though it was a stem cell. So for the very first time in the case of neuropsychiatric disorders like bipolar, we have a living cell model that we can study. So what we've done is taken samples of skin from people with bipolar disorder and people who are not diagnosed with bipolar disorder, turned them into neurons in our tissue culture laboratory, and these are early neurons from a person with bipolar disorder. So these are stem cells. We can see them.
They're beautiful.
We think they're pretty.
Yeah.
They're
And
not fair.
then here's
And then they go on to differentiate. And so from the blue image, you can make either glial cells, which are the supporting cells of the nervous system, or neurons. And in this particular case, the red cells are differentiated neurons. So for the first time, again, we can look at how the neurons talk to each other. Neurons use chemical signals and electrical signals to talk in the brain, and we're finding that the bipolar cells talk in very different ways. They're hyperactive. They signal to each other more and with greater amplitudes. And the other thing that's been really exciting for us is that when we put those neurons into a tissue culture dish and treat them with lithium, which is the mainstay medication for bipolar disorder, they change their characteristics and start to behave as controls.
Wow.
So for us, it's really cool because we think finally we have a way to model and test medicines in a tissue culture dish.
That's interesting. So lithium has been the main drug, that's from way back, too.
From way back.
And so it's just
I
the
think
amount of lithium that you give, right? Is that?
It's the amount, it's the timing. Lithium was initially approved by the FDA for use in neuropsychiatric disorders in the 70s.
I remember hearing about that.
So there's definitely a need to make new and better medicines. And finally, we have a cell-based model that we can test. And right now, we're working on ketamine.
So
Oh,
when,
wow.
when you can see it, does that
You can
help
see
with
it.
the patient and say, we can see it? You can't take, as you said, a tissue or example, sample from your brain, but with stem cell, you can say, here,
it
this
is.
is what you're
Yeah.
suffering from.
I really hope that it'll lessen the stigma because
That's
you
what
know
I
you can
think.
see a broken bone, but if
Yeah.
you've got something wrong with a neuron, there's no way a person can. You can know it intellectually, but seeing
It's
it,
a
I think,
physical problem.
is a way that you can kind of understand it in a different way. I think that's going to be really important, not only for the patients, but going forward and educating people about where bipolar really lives.
So let's then concentrate on your department
Sure.
and research. What are you working on now? Where are you going?
Well, so the first goal was to really make these cells, and that took us years. It's not an easy process to take a skin cell and turn back the clock and turn it into a stem cell. So the first thing that we wanted to do is to get that down and make a bunch of lines from individuals with bipolar disorder and healthy controls. And then we wanted to prioritize them. Initially, we did that based on their neuroticism levels. Now we're doing it on their drug responsiveness. And we wanted to see how they signal, how they talk to each other, what genes they express. One of the really interesting things to me as a developmental biologist is that they're misaddressed. They go to the wrong parts of the brain. So if you think about mailing 2 postcards in Omaha, the bipolar postcard goes to Texas, and the control postcard goes to Detroit. So there's something essential that happens in the really early differentiation of the brain that we need to figure out, because earlier treatment should be much better for people. So it's
Well, it
been
is
really
great
interesting.
because, back in the day, and I don't know if this is the 20s or 30s, but people just thought it was an emotional problem. Those
Yeah,
people had
suck
to be,
it up.
Right, suck it up. It's an emotional issue, or it's hereditary, or it's environmental, or whatever. So it is so nice to be able to see that visually.
Absolutely.
That it's absolutely happening as a physical.
Well, and hopefully, in addition to the physiological characteristics and the physical picture we can see, we'll figure out how they respond differently to different medicines.
To different medicines.
And maybe
That's
there
the
can
key,
be
really.
earlier and earlier in, fixes to the procedure. Obviously, it doesn't happen. Bipolar doesn't happen to an individual when they get their diagnosis. Things in the brain have been changing maybe for decades before the diagnosis.
When
So-
are people usually diagnosed? And it's after a certain age, isn't it?
Around 18,
It's 18.
yes, around puberty.
Is it because they've gone through the process of it's not this, it's not, it's not HDD, it's not depression, is it because of the difficulty of getting diagnosis?
No, I do believe it has to do with the time in their lives when they leave high school and stresses happen in their lives and they are on their own in college. Happens to many, many kids. And also because of hormonal changes in their bodies. So,
Now, let's talk about, earlier, about how lifestyle can really, and controlling lifestyle
Oh,
choices.
that's interesting.
Um,
Does that help?
I think
Environmental?
it helps. Will it drastically change the course of your illness? I do not think so. We do not have the evidence today that it takes.
But again, hopefully with the cell-based models, we'll be able to put a stressor in the cells, see how they might respond. And maybe this bipolar patient will respond to a stress in a different way.
You're right.
And we can have a predictive model then about, sort of suggesting that you want to avoid stressful situations or you want to avoid putting yourself in that position.
and you can do that through stem cell instead
Well-
of making the person go through.
It might
guesswork.
seem trite, but hopefully, my hope is that we'll find kinds of patients that respond in different ways and we'll be able to bin them and we'll say this is, you know, bipolar A and this is bipolar C, and we'll be able to predict then based on the characteristics of the cells.
That would be amazing.
Customize-
There's so many
Exactly.
Customize medicine to the
Personalized
person and
medicine.
personalize the medicine.
That would be
That's the
great.
future of medicine, is personalized medicine.
How is the fund benefiting your research?
I couldn't have done any of it without the fund. we would be dead in the water.
Now, how did you two meet?
Dr. McGinnis was our principal investigator, had a relationship with Dr. Sue O'Shea, and decided that we needed some funding, and we were very fortunate to find the Schwartzberg family, who has funded
The work, it's been tremendous.
Sue's work, and it's been tremendous, and I have great respect and admiration for.
It's a great gift
It's
to
a
be able
thrill.
to do this.
Well,
this
usually
kind
you
of
have to
work.
write a grant, don't
Well,
you,
we-
or grant writing, and it's still
so-
probably part of that. But
It will. We just finished a big U grant with multiple institutions to try to get funding so that we can collaborate a little bit and understand different sorts of bipolar disorders. So it's a struggle for us.
and you don't want to mix this up with schizophrenia at all. Like this is not even a part of it.
We do not say that we don't want to mix it up. We do not.
But
We
at
want
this
to say that
point,
we are not.
You're bipolar.
That we do not have experts on the table for
Right,
that today.
okay.
So maybe.
There may be a relationship.
Yeah.
We don't know it right now.
Because
Right.
I know people will be asking that, because
Yes.
people do, you know, that's kind of a hot topic too.
It is, and people are using stem cells in the same way. We're just
Right.
not doing that work.
Right.
There are people in
to
Michigan who are
clarify that.
interested in doing that, but it's not our group.
Let's move on to the technology, because I think that's actually why what prompted me to even call you guys is that I had read about using apps and how that helps bipolar patients. Can you either of you address that?
You want to talk?
Sure. Well, I've done enough. So it's not something that either one of us are
Yes.
really qualified to go into details, but it really grows out of observations from family members who say things like, I could hear it in his voice.
Right.
Things were changing, things were going down the tubes. We needed to get him an intervention because I could hear it. And so with the advent of technologies, and particularly voice recognition software, so you think about Siri, where's the next Starbucks? Or please enter or say your 25-digit account code followed by the pound key. So those sorts of technologies are really coming to the forefront now. And this doesn't use word recognition, but rather it uses emotion recognition.
Very interesting.
So it's things like pitch or rushed kind of speech. It's the emotional content of the speech that they're looking at. And the goal really is to predict when someone is getting worse so that you can get them help. And you can think that you might be sitting in the Bahamas and you call in and somebody says, you really need to get to a hospital. And the other flip side of this really is that you might think that you could call in and not need to come in for treatment.
So it's voice detection.
It's detection of
Through
stress
an
in
app.
your voice and pitch that the engineers are working on to really make early
Right.
diagnosis.
It's
And
an
this
early
is-
warning signal, like a biomarker that we can dedicate down the road. This is part of how we classify this as an illness.
So if I'm going through, say, a manic episode, I'm
Yes.
going to, my heart rate is going to go up, I'm going to talk faster, and the app is going to sense
Pick that up.
pick that up, and maybe call my supports, my
Exactly.
mom,
Exactly.
my doctor,
Yes.
So it's based,
or me.
It's based
right?
on
Yes.
months of normal conversations to get a baseline for what your
For what
speech
your
sounds
voice
like.
is.
Right.
And then you can hear the stress in the voice and call someone to get them in, to get
Or it
some
would,
help.
or it would notify me, the person that's with the
That hasn't-
disorder, saying,
yeah.
hey,
Right.
you know,
You should get in.
That's
check
right.
what you're doing.
So this is not a predictor. This is more with somebody that absolutely has been diagnosed.
That's right.
That's
Okay.
correct. It's
And
an
then
early
they-
warning signal for
Right.
people
For that
who are in
person.
that situation
To
because
get help.
it happens
Exactly.
fast.
How would that help you as a mom? And
How
as
would
a
that
wife?
help me? Well, actually, I know the voice that my daughter has, and I call her every day, and I can tell where she is. You learn that over time. That's how this whole thing kind of got started, because you can say, oh, wow, what's going on? Well, let me drive quick and meet up with her and do something or
So
talk to
in
her.
my situation with my daughter, if I
Yes.
said, hey, you're going through this, she'd say, bye-bye.
Click.
Right, click. So great that you know, but then in this app situation, maybe someone else besides a mom, you know,
That's right.
you know, a
Caretaker.
doctor,
How
a
is that?
caretaker,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
a hospital would say, you know,
Click.
That's
yeah,
right.
Check.
Yes,
Well,
think that's
go to the
fascinating.
front of the line. This
Right.
person really
Oh,
does
right,
need
at the
help.
ER.
That's right.
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 I think that's fascinating. And
It's
what a
really
wonderful
cool.
use
yes.
of, you know, we've done this type of research, and you know, just with just watching people. I mean, just it's so great that it's just all coming together.
Yes.
It seems.
That's
Do you
right,
feel
it's
that way
different
now?
Yes, I do
levels.
feel that way. I'm excited about it because I looked at it from a business perspective also. I said, let's make it a little business, and then people can, you know, download the app, and whatever funding we get through this will go back to the fund.
Oh, that's
So that's
wonderful.
another way of looking at it. So, but I think it's really cool.
So we
that
don't
we
know
have
yet if it's hereditary or environmental or all of it.
Oh, it's highly
It
hereditary.
is highly
Yes, it
hereditary.
is.
So twin family adoption studies always identify like 85% heritability, and yet
Okay.
a single gene, or we haven't identified a single gene, or a combination of genes are responsible, and yet we don't know what they are.
Okay, so you know that it
it's
is hereditary,
definitely hereditary.
but you just don't know what genes predict.
That's right.
Okay.
Or what combination of genetic background and
Right.
stress or something else going on in life.
And it's like anything else, it's a predisposition for it.
I
It's whether
believe that's
stressors or
correct.
environmental.
It's a whole symphony of a lot of different factors that have to come together.
Okay.
But you can imagine that if your brain is initially wired incorrectly,
Right.
that
Right.
you deal with a life stress or you deal with a problem in a different way because you're already predisposed to react in a particular way.
Right.
That's right.
How can our viewers help? What can they do?
Well, we have a Victor for Michigan campaign ongoing right now, and we have a campaign for the fund of $25 million to be raised. And please go on the website, prechterfund.org, and help us raise more funds, because this is a wonderful fund. We use all of our monies for research, and would be very much appreciated.
When I think our viewers can really see that their donations to the
Yes.
fund are really putting, not to just
Makes a
good use,
huge
but
difference.
remarkable,
Absolutely.
remarkable findings.
And connecting the two right here. This is really good. Yeah.
So one more time, the website that they could go to.
Prechterfund.org. You go on the website, and if you could donate, that'd be wonderful. We have a budget of $1.5 million a year. We have 40 people working at the fund. We use all our funding for research, and we would appreciate the support. Thank you.
Great. You know what?
Very good.
Our time is up. Thank you so much again for taking time away from your
you.
studies and for sharing your story.
Absolutely.
Once again,
Thanks for having us.
And just the
Thank
wonderful
you for having us.
steps that are being taken. And thank you for joining us. And be sure to stay tuned. We'll have great stories next week too.
Yeah.